So many takeaways, folks, to get to concerning Nebraska football following a 13-10 last-second loss at Minnesota to open the season. And look who the next opponent is and look at what they did on Saturday. So I think it adds a lot of fuel to the fire in regards to expectations and how good this team should be and how they will do this Saturday. And I think all you need to do is look at the point spread to see where people's emotions are after what they saw against the Buffs. We got Justin Adams here. You can catch Justin's work right here, the voice of college football, after each and every Nebraska game. Join Justin for post-game live right here at the voice of college football. Justin, what's going on today?
Not a whole lot. Enjoying a little conversation to start it out and ready to get a little bit more into the detail of upcoming game on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we already fixed Nebraska football. I should have had it recording already. But Justin and I, good conversation. We'll bring it to the present in terms of going to Minnesota, losing by 3 points. I know that the ugly nature of the offense, Jeff Sims in particular, is the thing that everyone is taking away from this game. Jeff Sims, 3 interceptions, and very much in the narrative that you and I talked about here in the last few weeks on our Nebraska show, Tuesday, everyone, 7 o'clock Eastern time, is the narrative of turnovers, and not just the number of turnovers, the timing of the turnovers being drive killers and down near the last portions of the game, and that we got to see that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of like what I alluded to, you know, we did lose the turnover battle 4-1. All right, so the number of turnovers was the major issue. The timing of the turnover became the storyline. And I think that's what's distracting a lot of people from the overall play of the game and stuff like that. But the turnovers were pretty bad. Sims, you know, his interceptions were terrible. And then the timing of Anthony Grant's, and then the question that it raised as to why Anthony Grant's in the game there when he's had fumbling issues all of fall camp. And then so that stuck out in our mind, and that stuck out in a lot of people's mind when trying to assess how the game went. And I think all of our focus came down to that, just the timing of that turnover. And it's all emotion. And when they asked Rule about it, he said that he was playing the best in that play all throughout, you know, camp, and every time they would run it, he was having the most success. So they're even detailing down to, you know, which players having more success on the play, which to me, I like that takeaway more than I'm concerned about the takeaway of the timing of the turnover. But it is this 800-pound gorilla on our back that the national conversation won't let off of us until we start, you know, pulling off a couple of these close wins. And not only that, but having a couple maybe come from behinds or some where we have to make a big play, you know, to end a one-score game in the fourth quarter. But yeah, like I said, just kind of takes away from the actual storylines of the game.
Justin, I think part of this is that some people can't look at the context of the situation. So you've got a camp of people that think as soon as a head coach takes over a program, everything that's happened in the past is dismissed. It's a fresh new start. Nothing transfers to their program. And then there are other people that think that this culture, this whatever it is, just kind of stays. And neither to me is true. You know, it lies somewhere in the middle. It's a process. Matt Rule's taken over a program, and he's taken over a lot of players that are used to losing games. That doesn't mean they're bad players. That doesn't mean they're bad people. That doesn't mean that they haven't worked hard, but they need to be taught how to win. Now, does he snap his fingers and get that done? Well, he came very close to doing it against a good opponent that usually wins 8 or 9 games and is at home. So, you know, people aren't real enamored with 13-10 because it was an ugly game, but they did take in the moral wins. I know you're not into, I'm not into, and so forth, but you have to understand there has to be a process and progress made. And so there's a little bit of both. This is Matt Rule's program. It is a new program, but he's dealing with players that mostly played under Scott Frost, and he's trying to instill a different level of attention to detail, poise, execution, confidence, all those things.
Very much to your point of how it's half and half. Okay. Scott Frost, with those players, they have built these bad habits. The players that have been with him for years, it's almost like coaching bad habits into players. And I can use I coach boxing, so I can use kind of a boxing example here. But it's, if you come in and you have a background in some other striking, let's say Muay Thai, where your stance is a little different and stuff like that, it's going to be harder to unbreak those bad habits so you can learn the proper good habits. So when you're coming in from a program that has built up a ton of bad habits, it's going to take even longer, and it's going to be much harder to coach those things out of those guys, especially when it's been coached over them for 4 or 5 years. And so that even more so than if he took over a program that didn't have these issues and didn't have these cultural issues. So it becomes compounded based on that. And then about the players, a lot of these guys most of these guys are Frost guys. That's what should give people a lot of, optimism for the future, because as those players filter out of there, this new culture that Rule is building, and this is the entire reason why he's a program builder, he's already building those in the new players, the freshmen and stuff like that, true freshmen, and he's building those good habits and the transfers that came from other places. And those are going to be able to build faster than we're going to be able to reprogram the habits of the other players, if that makes sense. And so I think, does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll just making sure I can explain it for the detail. I know sometimes I tend to ramble, so just making sure. But it's just one of those things that I just think and I alluded to this earlier, we don't exercise patience, especially when we have, a first-year coach. But we're very comparative on how we do it situationally. So, for instance, Riley coached, Scott Frost came in. We blamed Riley for years to defend Scott Frost as to why the program was still messed up. They said Riley had this bad culture and it was too nice and the players weren't squatting and there wasn't enough strength and conditioning. And we came up with this myriad list of things that why we should blame Riley. I'm sorry, the not squatting was a Frost thing, but pointing to Riley because Riley he was a questionable hire. So he was easy to point the finger at. Scott Frost was hard to point the finger at. Well, now I feel like Matt Rule, not being the hometown guy and all this other stuff, it's going to be a little too easy for people to point the finger at him too. And hopefully never gets people to the point of defending what Scott Frost did. And kind of like you alluded to, some people might be kind of conflating that as Scott Frost not being the issue, which is not the case. It's just, it's week one. And in the grand scheme of things, he's been in there a few months and doesn't turn over. It's not how this works. He doesn't turn over a complete roster. It's just, it's the nature of the beast. And everybody said it's going to be a little bit of a while for a turnaround. We're talking 5, 6, 7 wins and predictions, and people are still upset that we come out and played pretty well to a 9-win Minnesota team that's in their 7th year under Fleck and has a very good defense, I might add.
7th year under Fleck. So get that, everyone. First game for Rule, 7 years under Fleck. He's got his system down pat. Everybody knows it. Terminology, everything, relationships. It's all been set and been running well for a long time. Now, I'm not throwing Minnesota up as some great standard of college football like they're Georgia or Alabama, but they are a good team and they're fundamentally sound, and they've been playing great defense and running the football really well. Through 3 seasons, the last 3 full seasons, 11-2, 9-4, 9-4. So they've been really good, and Nebraska needs to beat them, surpass them, all those things, no doubt about it. But on this night, they lost an extremely close game that they were up by a touchdown with 2 minutes left. So there was good play in there. So before we get to the good play, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, the guy that everyone's talking about, of course, is Jeff Sims.
Yes.
So my thought about Jeff Sims is, first of all, we talk about culture, we talk about habits. He's coming from a place that I bet I know football records pretty well and pretty much have most of them all. The winning percentage is almost exact. If you
Yeah.
looked at what he did at Georgia Tech versus what Nebraska's been since 2020, it's almost exact ineptness in terms of the program, the team. And so he had to deal with that. And he's been a capable, good quarterback. Not great, not elite. I never push him in that direction, but I don't think people should run and say, okay, 3 interceptions, he's going to be a disaster. Well, he's got a long track record that says he's not a disaster. He has a skill set, and hopefully with better coaching, he will be a better quarterback.
Yeah. And this goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, where he hasn't really built good habits, passing and mechanics and pocket stuff, because he didn't have to at Georgia Tech, right? If you have a team that's running the triple option and running the ball a ton, well, they're going to work running the ball a ton in practice. They're not going to work a ton of passing. So he had this over at Georgia Tech, and he was being coached to run the ball essentially and occasionally pass. Now he's coming over and he's finally getting coaching on and more in-depth coaching on passing the football. And again, that's going to take time as well. It's not like a guy, he's come in here and he's been with one coach the whole time and just isn't getting it. It's a completely different focus. And if you have a guy who's working running the ball, because that's the focus of the offense, well, then he's going to be very good at running the ball and probably not as good at passing. It's like pitchers and hitters, right? Pitchers aren't good hitters because why? Because they work pitching all the time. Vice versa. Hitters don't work pitching, so they can't pitch. And again, he's only been there for a few months. What I wanted to see is progression over the course of the season. I do think there are a lot of things that stood out that he can work on, of course. I don't think he's very quick with his decision making. I think a lot of times he would, instead of stepping up in the pocket, he would kind of just almost try to rely on his legs too much and wouldn't be able to escape. They'd get contains on him, and then he just end up kind of running backwards and taking a long sack. It doesn't get rid of the ball quick, doesn't throw it away a lot. There are a lot, but a lot of that stuff too is going to be in reps. And those things were huge in that game, of course. Like big sacks and all that stuff is huge. But that's another reason why I'm not too terribly concerned about it, is because I feel like that, not only that, but going against a tough Minnesota defense, he learned a lot of lessons in this game that I think he needed to learn. I think this might have been the best case scenario for us, is to come out and play against a tough team and a tough defense instead of coming out and playing, Utah State and winning 35-0. I'm not saying that for any particular reason, but I win like 35-0.
You know who Utah State played Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at there. But and I said 35, so I make sure we get to score more than they did. But yeah, so we come out and we beat them 35-0. He throws 4 touchdowns and 198 yards. Let's say it was that. It would be praising him, praising Nebraska and all this other stuff. But that wouldn't help us as much as coming out and playing Minnesota on the road, week 1, game 1, testing this. Like, to me, that even though we lost, I would have much rather us played in a game like that, in a hard-fought game, to where we grew and matured as a team, versus the opposite. And so with Sims, I think it's patience. With just like with everything else, it's patience. And there was a lot of good. He has an arm. He just needs to get a little bit more touch on occasion. Doesn't really seem like they want to trust him with the deep ball too much. I didn't see him take too many shots. There was the broken play. One of the things that I did like is on that broken play where we scored the touchdown. That's something you can't teach. That instinctive ability to just be able to make that play. That is one thing that we need to take away that's positive. I get it was a broken play and like kind of stinks that we scored on a broken play or 1 touchdown, but those instincts are some stuff that you can't teach. No panic. The ball's there. The ball was bouncing up to him. He went and got it, didn't try to do too much and fumble it and make matters worse. He picked it up, kept his eyes up the field, and threw it for a touchdown. So there's also a lot to like with him too. But yes, it's going to take some time. yeah, they're gonna need to coach a lot of those things into them.
Yeah, sometimes you can outthrow a bad decision with a unbelievable NFL kind of throw, and sometimes you make a bad throw or not a completely accurate throw, but you make the right decision, and there's enough space there that you can make it work. That throw that he made to the red zone, in the end zone, I should say, at the end of the half, that was picked off. It was a little bit of both, where he didn't recognize that the one corner could come off of his guy. But if he would have thrown it, plus he underthrew it by way too much. So he bad throw and bad decision. But if he places that ball exactly where it should be, he could have possibly outthrown a bad decision with an excellent throw, but he just didn't do it.
His interceptions were bad. Like the interceptions that he threw, like he made a lot of good throws, but the interceptions were just very, very poor decisions, very poor throws. And so, yeah, that, and kind of to your point there, where you said if he would have thrown it here, then that's also what Rule was talking about. He's like, it's our job as coaches to point these plays out to them that are there to make. He's like, they're going to make them, but we got to show them. It's our job as coaches to show them where those plays are on the film and say, hey, the play was here to be made. You just got to do this. And that's one of the things too that people have to understand is he's learning a lot of these things and learning a lot of this offense. So they're going to be teaching him where to look and where he should be looking for the plays. I just think for him, with their offensive line the way it is, that they need to have a hot read, and they need to have, it's got to be, I think we need to do a lot more in the quick pass game and just get guys into space, try to do RPOs. But it's got to be, I just think we need to get the ball quickly out of his hands. Minnesota was doing that. I think their quarterback, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I'm terrible with names. But he averaged under 5 yards per completion. And so it wasn't a whole lot of them throwing to the sticks, throwing 15 yards down the field. It was a lot of nickel and diming. And that works. You only have to get 10 yards to get a first down. You come out a couple 3-4 yard plays every, it's just in the details. And I think Rule and Satterfield are really going to focus on playing to those strengths now and hopefully adjust the game plan based on what they saw a little bit, but then also still kind of test him so he can grow with his arm and stuff.
And just to confirm my earlier point, since Jeff Sims' first game in 2020 as the starting quarterback at Georgia Tech is 11-24. Nebraska is 10-23, basically identical. That's the culture that he grew up in and was developed in a bad situation, a coach that ultimately got fired as well for doing a bad job.
Yep.
And then to your point about Ethan Kalkumanis, yeah, he's a fairly inexperienced quarterback, but he played a lot of valuable time in meaningful moments against good teams for Minnesota. So he's not just thrown out there first starter. Yeah, he was the backup, but because the injuries to Tanner Morgan had to play last year. And let's not forget, and we'll move this into your evaluation of Nebraska's defensive play, that while Minnesota's no juggernaut on offense, some prolific offense, the last time Kalkumanis started a game was the last regular season game against a Big Ten opponent. He put up 319 against Wisconsin. So he can sling it. So the defensive effort, people should be optimistic about.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense was, and I don't think they're getting talked about enough. They were phenomenal. The pass rush was improved. I'm not going to say the pass rush was good, but again, they were getting the ball out of his hands quick. Kalkumanis was making decisions quick. I think I got it right. He was making decisions quick, and so we didn't really have time to get too much of a pass rush. There was a couple times where he had all day in the pocket, and we're not claiming to have the best pass rush in the world, but it's the secondary was phenomenal. I mean, we saw an interception in man coverage. I don't know the last time I've seen an interception in man coverage on our defense, because we just haven't been turning the ball over a lot recently. So to see our DB be able to actually lock up and stick in man for once is good, because I just think for the longest time against Big Ten opponents, our defensive backs were just, it seemed like they were always outmatched. And against the really good teams like the Ohio States, that's why you have Jackson Smith and Jigba going for over 200 some odd yards. So the defense was very much improved, and I wish people would put a little bit more emphasis in that too, because that had turnover too. We have a new defensive coach as well. So 2 of the 3 position groups, in my opinion, improved, and the defense was one of them. I don't remember the last time we've had a good defense, but I would rather start with a very good defense and then try to gain and grow a good offense versus the opposite. Trying to have an offense and then get a defense. I think it's much harder and more difficult to build a solid defense than it is an offense. And so that was one of my biggest takeaway, was just how good the defense looked. The way they were moving Gifford around, especially, Isaac Gifford was all over the field. Deshaun Singleton was making plays. I know he kind of got beat there on one, or was that him or Hartzog? But they did make some errors. There was some over pursuits and stuff like that, but I think that was just coming out with fire and just wanting to make a play in week 1, because I feel like the biggest thing on the defensive side of the ball that we didn't do was contain, kind of like Minnesota was. When we'd get Kaliakmanis in the pocket and would start collapsing on him, our players would all kind of take one line towards him, and so he would be able to escape out, and there's no contain. So then there was one play where he rolled out right, and you had, of course, the DB and the linebacker that are over there are in no man's land. They're either going to have to cover their receiver, or they're going to have to engage and go after him so he doesn't have all day to throw, and it puts them in a tough spot. So it's, instead of everybody trying to go make the play on the quarterback, we need to do a lot better job of containing him into the pocket, and that way he doesn't have as much room to operate, and he can't make as much time as he did. But yeah, for the most part, linebackers, DBs, and even our D line was great. Ty Robinson, of course, got a targeting call, so he's going to be suspended for the first half of next game. But all in all, I loved it. I was very, very impressed with the defense.
And now Justin is a completely different animal. Going to Boulder. This is a tough spot to put this team and to put this program for a first-year head coach, is that they go on the road playing a 9-win team at their place. I'm not going to sell Minnesota's, Death Valley or anything, but again, you're on the road, Big Ten game, division game right out of the gate. And then the next game, you're coming off having to deal with a team that's red hot, that's going to be sky high, pardon the pun there. And you go to Boulder, Colorado, and the place is going to be hyped and jacked, and everybody's going to be into it. But this is going to be a great test for this team.
Yeah, and there's a lot I have to say on this game this week. So there's hopefully I'll be talking a lot about it. But I'll start here. To me, that was a perfect storm for not only Colorado, but it's a perfect storm for Nebraska as well. Just in the lead up to this game, kind of talking about, hot and cold. The defensive showdown, of course, didn't get the love and attention that the offensive shootout did. Now, that's causing people, I believe, to just really kind of blow things out of proportion and really focus too much on one thing, and which is the polarizing storyline, the one that the casual college football audience can gravitate towards, right? That's another reason why I think it was good, is because Prime brings casual fans to the game of college football. I saw people posting about college football that I haven't seen post about college football ever. And it was because they were watching the Colorado TCU game. So on one breath, it's good, because that's going to bring eyes to Saturday. All eyes are going to be on us. If there's any shot at redemption, this is the perfect scenario for us. The reason why it was a perfect storm for Colorado, and why I think everybody's kind of blowing things out of proportion, is because the way it's set up, Fox big noon kickoff, the big opening, Saturday of college football, they're going in there and they're playing a team that was in the national championship last year, lost 65-7, might I add. But so they can use the whole, okay, Colorado, 1-win team coming in and playing a team that was in the national championship last year, had 1 loss. That team, that TCU team, what people don't talk about is how that team lost 17 of their 22 starters, including their quarterback to the draft, their wide receiver to the draft, was a first-round graded draft pick, might I add, didn't go in the first, Quentin Johnson. And then Kendre Miller, who they lost in the draft, that was their offense, essentially. And their defense was never good. Their defense wasn't that good. And that defense even had turnover. So to me, that 17th ranked TCU team, that's not a 17th ranked TCU team. That team is not good. I do think Colorado did play better than we expected. They did play better than I expected. But I think people are talking about too much what Colorado is versus what TCU isn't. And I think people need to focus more so on TCU kind of last year being a flash in the pan type of situation. I don't know if people remember, but if Adrian Martinez doesn't get hurt for K-State, TCU doesn't win that game against K-State, and they're not undefeated. So they had a lot of luck going into being in the national championship game. So the hype around Colorado right now and going into the Nebraska game and the talk about Nebraska and the way we lost and all of that, I think all of that's a recipe for everybody on the Colorado bandwagon not somehow not giving us a chance. And I'll get more into why I think that's crazy. But it's completely unwarranted, and it's just a reaction. But all eyes are on us Saturday, and this game is going to be huge. And if Matt Rule the era begins of Matt Rule by winning Colorado, that's a great thing because again, people are going to be watching. And what better way to get back on track than to do it in front of everybody?
The psychologies of the two teams appear to be, but appearances can be deceptive. They appear to be completely different. That Colorado's got to be sky high, totally amped, confident, just exuding confidence because number one, that's just the nature of their head coach.
Yep.
So the proof of concept was that they beat a decent team, good team, great team, whatever you want to rank them. I agree with you. Everything you stated is completely accurate about TCU. I think they're probably the 40th best team in the country, something like that.
Yep.
And so that's what that's I've posted content. I give Dion and his staff all sorts of credit of molding and being able to bring together 68 new players and new players for them across the board on the entire roster, put it together and beat a good team or a decent team on the road. And it was exciting that, people love the story. And from a functional standpoint, Nebraska just faces a completely different team that's not going to punch you in the mouth and bully you. They're going to throw it around you and use speed and space. And they threw it 46 times against TCU. And so the defense is going to have to make serious adjustments.
Correct. And I do believe that the game is going to be a matter of us trying to just completely slow the game down and keep their offense off the field as much as possible. So we don't turn it into like a track meet. But however, I do think Colorado going into that game was playing with a lot of fire, a lot of intensity, because it is week one. It's under prime. They got the fresh white new unis. They're out there on Fox Big Noon kickoff. But the thing about motivation is motivation isn't always there, right? You're not always that motivated to get up as you are week one to get up on the road, go play the defending team that's so. I think a lot of that went into that too, and a couple of things that aren't going to be sustainable are that they were fired up. They're coming in. Dion gave them that pre-game speech that they posted everywhere and stuff like that. And I just think I don't think we can use that as a gauge to see how Colorado is going to be the rest of the year, because again, also we don't know how good really TCU is or how bad TCU is. And that's another thing too, is people are trying to do what we call fighter math, right? Fighter math is saying, well, this fighter beat this fighter, and this guy beat the guy that beat him, so that guy should be able to beat him. But it doesn't work like that. Styles make fights, right? And it's the same in college football. Styles matchups make games. I just think there's nothing that you can take away from that game that's going to look anything similar to what we're going to see on Saturday. And so Colorado, yes, they came out and performed very well in week 1, but I just think there was a lot of storyline things that people can point to as a reason to boost them up a little bit. Again, defending national champ TCU, people want this storyline. College football wants a storyline. The media wants a storyline because they get clicks, they get views, and all this other stuff. And it plays in everybody's hand. And again, a lot of casual college football fans are tuning in to watch this. So it's very good for the game of college football. It's unfortunate that it has to be at Colorado, but it's and I'll get into more just kind of like explaining why I think in detail why I think it's going to look different.
Join Justin after every Huskers game right here at the Voice of College Football, GBR. So after every game, Justin has post-game reaction with all of you. He'll take your comments and questions right here. And then don't forget, Tuesdays at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, Huskers Live. And again, we take your comments and questions. So the things that I will say in response to maybe Colorado not necessarily being the same team coming out in week 2 would be, yes, this is going to be most likely going to be a very inconsistent team. They're going to be hot and cold. They certainly showed me something that I didn't know that they had. Of course, we haven't seen these players together and haven't seen them at this level. And now it makes me think, okay, they're going to be playing games against the better teams in the Pac-12, where on occasion they're going to get throttled 52-17 because the offense isn't going to be completely on. They'll still score some points because they've got that kind of offense and those kind of playmakers, but where the line depth is not what it should be, they'll get beat up, they'll get exposed, they'll lose those kind of games. But when they're on, they might be a really tough out 3 or 4 times this year. Now, the thing that leads me into thinking that they may be up for another game in a row is obviously the home field advantage and being able to sustain that momentum, that level of play with the support and encouragement of a home crowd that's going to be raucous.
Yeah. And to your point there, if alluded to 2019, if you look at the 2019 Colorado-Nebraska game, though, that stadium was about 70-30 Nebraska fans. So I do think the stadium could very well much be 60-40 Colorado fans, Nebraska fans, because when we did the CU Red Out in 2019, that stadium was about 75% Husker fans, and they had things in place to keep this year to try to keep Nebraska fans from being able to buy season tickets, to be able to get Colorado season tickets to go to the game. They were trying to prevent a lot of it. So I think there's going to be a lot of Nebraska fans there too, but I do what you're saying, the home game, the excitement behind that, it can carry over because, it's a short time frame, week 1 and week 2. Like, we're not saying that this is a game in week 4 and it'll carry 4 weeks. However, I don't know how it's going to look at altitude. That's another thing too that we got to consider. Playing in Colorado, playing at altitude, the conditioning is going to change a lot. And those guys did look gassed at points during that game. And then you have 68, I think, scholarship players total. It was either that or it's 78. I know he acquired like 11, but there was like 68 scholarship players. The depth isn't there. And can that team hold up in a battle of the trenches dogfight? Not something where it's big play, offense off the field, and then big play TCU when the game is slowed down and it gets really in the trenches. Will that team be able to hold up, and do they have the depth to go 4 quarters in a battle of attrition and in a game like that where a team slows the game down for them? And I think with those things and kind of the fact that it is year one under Prime, that team was a 1-win team last year. He has not, while he has done a great job using the transfer portal and getting a lot of talented guys in that team, he has one player playing both sides of the ball. And that kind of has to point to the fact that there's not a lot of depth on that team. Without Travis Hunter, I think TCU loses that game by multiple scores. And so I don't know if he's going to be able to continue to sustain that or continue to do that. And secondly, is he going to be able to do that in a game where we're probably going to be in a lot of very, very heavy sets, and we're probably going to be trying to wear them down? That's probably going to be our game plan. Hopefully it is. Can they hold up in a game where a team's actively trying to wear you down? Because I don't think TCU did a very good job of attacking their deficiencies. They did quite the opposite, in my opinion.
He played both sides, and he played 141 snaps.
Crazy.
It was an incredible game by him, and they had 3 receivers over 100 yards for the first time in Colorado history. Shedeur Sanders set the all-time Colorado passing record, which is just crazy to think about. 100-year history, roughly, of a college football program, and a guy's starting his first game, and he throws for 510, and that's the all-time record. Just a ton of huge plays. They ran 2 plays in this game that I was even more so impressed with. And in addition to this, what I'm about to mention, I was impressed that they not only were a lot of flash. Now, I don't think they're going to be a strong team at the point of attack or anything like that, but they held up well enough in this kind of game against TCU. And their tackling wasn't bad on defense, and they didn't blow a bunch of coverages. So they were more sound of a football team than I anticipated. But what I saw was the first touchdown they ran, they had their 2 best players, Travis Hunter and their other wide receiver, Jimmy Horn, to the left. And they just basically ran slants and just crashed basically, and just they threw picks is what they basically did.
Yep.
Which sealed off the left side of the field. And then they just ran the back on a wheel route and just tossed it to him.
Yep.
And then what was interesting about the game, it was either the game winning touchdown or the lead touchdown in the fourth quarter. They did the same thing, but they gave it just a little bit more of a wrinkle that maybe TCU didn't recognize the same play. They put 3 guys out there and did the same thing and ran the back and tossed it to him for the game-winning touchdown, or it might have been the second to last touchdown. So a lot of ingenuity on offense. The offensive coordinator has a good reputation coming in from Kent State. So again, it's going to have to be, Nebraska is just going to have to change that complete focus from playing in a phone booth against Minnesota to now we're going to get stretched athletically out onto the perimeter.
Yeah. And I think what that, what TCU didn't do, and the reason why Colorado was able to hold up a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball is because, they were giving up over 7 yards per carry. They gave up over 240 yards on the ground. TCU insisted on passing the ball, though. I don't understand why. I don't either. I don't think TCU was the faster team by any stretch. So I think it was in their best.
And not to cut you off.
No, you're good,
Justin, but also, like the last drive of the game, they had plenty of time. There was like 4 minutes left in the game. They could have run the ball down their throats. Number one, their running backs were having great success. They were beating them up front. Number two, both defenses were wearing out in the fourth quarter. It was in the 90s, humidity. They were both worn out. So push them down the field. Number three, Chandler Morris is an okay quarterback, but man, he left a lot of plays on, and all quarterbacks are going to miss a couple throws in a game, but he missed a lot of throws. Like they could add 700 yards of total offense.
There was literally like 2 touchdowns, like plays that would have led 2 touchdowns, not like saying it would have kept a touchdown drive alive, that they lost because of him. That now I will say the Travis Hunter play that he made on that ball, that's a great throw. However, all Travis Hunter had to do is keep his eyes on the quarterback, and he looked that route down. Travis Hunter just did what a DB is supposed to do and kept his eyes on the quarterbacks. Kept his eyes on the quarterback, and he looked him right to that. But yeah, it was they left a lot out there on the field, and again, just I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. But I just don't think the coaching, they understood in the coaching that like these things that we're discussing today could have been the difference between them losing by 30 points and not losing by 30 points. Because we're talking about he left 200 yards of offense on the field. We're talking about Travis Hunter accounting for probably about 14 of their points, if not more, in just the way he played, probably more. That's another reason why I think kind of what everything going into what Colorado did is very much so an overreaction, because they played great, yes, but they had to make play after play after play after play to stay in that game and return, their punches back. It was just a slugfest. But it's not going to. That's also a team that hasn't been coached very well over time. That team's not going to come out there and just always make plays. They're going to make mistakes. And I think the games that they're going to make mistakes in are the ones like this, where we're probably going to try to limit their offense, how much time their offense on the field, how many drives they get. So they're going to maybe have to take more chances, or maybe have to do things differently, and maybe get fatigued more. And that'll force their hand in making those mistakes.
Matt Rule made a comment during Big Ten Media Days, and I'm sure you made this comment a number of times during the offseason, that, of course, they need to be balanced. They need to run well and pass well, but they're going to be committed to being a power running team. And sometimes that's going to look very traditional between the tackles, quarterback under center. And sometimes that's going to look like, hey, we're running the air raid, but they're going to hand the ball off to Grant or Irvin, and they're going to pound people. Excuse me. So they're going to be committed to that. And he knows it's a 4-quarter game, and those 2 and 3 yard runs in the first quarter may turn into 7 or 15 or 45 in the fourth.
Exactly. And, with Satterfield, it's kind of in his, he's always been that heavy set type of guy. Right. So with this plays perfectly into that hand. And I still do think that they are going to try to mix it up, kind of to your point. He's not going to just sit there and just go straight Big Ten football, Iowa style of football, line it up and just run. I do think he's still going to throw kind of similar wrinkles into kind of what Colorado does, TCU does, where they're going to try to get playmakers in space and stuff like that. But I don't think we can get too much into a battle of that, because I think that's kind of where we're going to get lost, like TCU did, in trying to make play after play after play and big play. And so we're passing, we're losing sight of ourselves. I don't think Rule's going to do that. I think Rule is the type of coach that's going to stay true to his game plan. And, I feel like some coaches, inexperienced coaches, could get caught up in that moment of feeling like they need to make a big play, or they need to score quicker than they do. And they don't take the time to really slow the game down and be like, let's milk some clock. Let's do this. Let's do this. I know we didn't do that in week 1, when I feel like we could have milked the clock a little bit more against Minnesota. But I just think one of the confident things that I have in Rule is I think he's going to stay within himself, and he trusts his system, and he trusts the people he has in place. And I think that will lead him to being able to just stick to what he knows, and what he knows is going to work against his team, and not get too much caught up in trying to spread things out too much, or trying to make too many flashy plays and stuff like that. I think that's what Frost got caught up doing, because Scott Frost was trying to be too flashy. And a lot of coaches, TCU, I think their coach was not really focusing on, if he would have called up, maybe talk to somebody in the booth. What are you seeing up there? Okay, well, they're averaging 7 yards a carry up the middle. Let's start trying to, they keep scoring so quick. Let's try to keep them off the field. Let's run the ball up the middle. Let's milk some clock. Let's try to limit the amount of possessions our offense is going to get. And that's kind of what I think Rule is alluding to there, is just like, we're not going to be a one-trick pony. It's going to be balanced, but it's going to very much depend on who we're playing, and we're going to attack based on that.
Because while it's easy to get caught up in the 4 turnovers, 19 pass attempts that didn't produce much of anything outside the one trick play. That Nebraska ran for just a shade under 5 yards per carry against a team that doesn't give up 5 yards per carry hardly ever. And so they're playing a much softer defense coming up this week and a thinner defense in regards to depth.
Yeah, a much smaller defense as well. Colorado doesn't have a lot of team size overall. And so I do think that that's going to play a part, because I think Nebraska has a little bit more size than TCU does, outside of the one guy that was like 450. The box score was almost identical. Everything from time of possession, yards, everything was identical except for turnovers. So I don't expect us to turn the ball over 4 times next week. And again, to your point, we're playing a much softer, easier defense. They're playing this past week. So our Russian attack needs to be, Jeff Sims is no small guy. He's 6'4". So even him running is going to wear down to that defense. Anthony Grant is very physical. I know that people aren't happy with the fumbling and the fumble and stuff like that, but I feel like Anthony Grant this is a get right game for Anthony Grant, because the physicality is what's going to wear them down, running the ball into the heart of that defense and the teeth of that defense, because they did have their hands on their hips towards the middle half of the fourth quarter. That D line did have their hands on their hips, and that defense wasn't even staying on the field that long. TCU, everybody was scoring quick, and so the defense wasn't even having to stay out on the field for extended drives. I feel like that's what Minnesota did in the first quarter, or the first half against us. We had 4 drives going into our last drive there, almost at halftime. And so we had like 5 drives in that first half. Well, that amplifies mistakes, and that makes it to where, that's going to wear on a defense. That's literally Big Ten football, is getting heavy, getting big, and wearing those defenses down by trying to keep that defense, sustain drives and keep that defense on the field, and then hurry up and try to get your offense to score whatever and get that defense back, or get your defense to do whatever, and then get your offense back and start pushing that defense again. And TCU didn't do that, and they were still kind of fatigued in the fourth quarter. So when you have a game plan of attacking that specific thing, and then you're sustaining drives, you're running the ball, you're stringing together first downs, you're actually sustaining a drive, that is going to compound tenfold. So if they were gassed in that game, there's a big potential that they can be worn down by halftime in this game, in my opinion. Again, for all things we considered, altitude and even the excitement, right? A lot of these players can come out and have an adrenaline dump, and just so it's just so many things that you can point to that can counter every pro that you make, outside of the fact that Shadur is a very good passer of the football. No knocking that. Travis Hunter is a great player, but as far as just the matchup goes and the game plan goes, I just think there's things that TCU just didn't do that we would be talking a completely different story if TCU just would have paid attention to this detail or this detail.
Justin Adams, Cheesy Corn Sports. It's right here on YouTube. Check it out, Cheesy Corn Sports. And of course, Justin hosts our post-game wrap-up show after every Nebraska game right here at the Voice of College Football. Join us on Tuesdays as well at 7 Eastern and 6 Central for Huskers Live. It's going to be raucous. It's going to be crazy. I enjoy the matchup in regards to the differences in the two teams. That all should make for a fun game, and we'll see who blinks first.
Yep. And one thing I do want to tell people, stop using Vegas odds moving as your gauge for who Vegas thinks is the better team. Vegas odds move based on money. So the initial line that came out after the Colorado game, where Nebraska was, I think, -5, was the first one that dropped. That's the most accurate one. People saying that it's -3, -5, therefore Colorado is favored in Vegas. That's technically not the case. Vegas doesn't necessarily think they're better. I just wanted to clear that up, because that's being argued a lot, and that just gambling's legal in Arizona, so I'm allowed to talk. So
Well, we appreciate it, Justin.
All right, appreciate it.